Hello, my name is Shona McPherson and I'm a speech and language therapist. I'm based in the Pines in Inverness and I'm part of the Neurodevelopmental training team which has been involved in delivering training across Highland. Today I would like to talk to you about our first piece of pie in our 6-piece wheel, and it's entitled Language and Communication Development. So, the way we communicate is very complex. Albert Mehrabian did a lot of research into this in the 1960s, and he came up with these percentages that you see here on the screen. And then he published a book with that in it called Silent Messages in 1971. These percentages have been debated over the years, and some would argue that 7% is too low for verbal. They would say it's slightly higher, but everybody agrees on the importance of understanding unspoken communication. So if we look at the non-verbal, that includes your body language, your gesture, your facial expression, how close we stand to one another when we're talking to them, which is known as proximity, how we position our bodies in relation to each other, what we're wearing, and how we move. Your paraverbal is the way we use the language. So that includes our tone of voice, our volume, how loudly or how quietly we speak, our intonation, and also the speed in which we talk. If we're a rapid speaker, generally in Scotland we all speak quite quickly. And also context comes into this. So some words will have different meanings depending on how and where they're used. And this is often used in jokes. For example, a customer asked a waiter in a restaurant, "What soup is this?" And the waiter said to him, "It's bean soup, sir." And the customer replied, "I don't care what it's been. What is it now?" Also, try telling somebody, "I think you're brilliant." And at the same time, you're smiling, you're maybe patting them on the back, you're really saying it in an encouraging way, then that person is going to feel really good about themselves. But if you say to that person, "I think you're brilliant," and you're rolling your eyes and your tone has changed, you've got a sarcastic tone to your voice, that person is going to feel really bad. That is if they can pick up on the sarcasm, on the tone, on your paraverbal and your nonverbal means of communication. Equally, for a child that doesn't pick up on nonverbal, saying to them, "Oh, well done," while they're emptying out your cupboards, they're only going to hear the words. They're not going to hear anything else, and they're going to carry on doing it. Verbal communication is just the actual words and the grammar. So even if it's slightly more than 7%, it's still the smallest by far of the 3 ways in which we communicate. So if your child is struggling to pick up on the nonverbal and the paraverbal, then there's an awful lot of what is being said to them that they are missing out. So try and be aware, try and think about what you say and how you say it, and is your child understanding? And if not, what can you do to help them? So if we take a moment to look in more detail at our non-verbal means of communication and our body language, we can see just how much is going on. If we look at the top 2 bubbles, our sounds and our ways of talking, that's our vocal means of communication, or our paraverbal, as I was mentioning in the previous slide. So thinking about sounds, how many times do we make these kind of sounds? We've got laughing, we've got we've got you know, we've got so many different sounds that we use, and if a child doesn't understand what the intention is from these sounds, they're just not going to understand the meaning. Same way when we look at the ways of talking. If we pause in a certain way, we can completely change the way we mean from a saying, or if we put stress on different words. For example, if I said, I said no. That sounds pretty definite, doesn't it? But if I say it like this, I said no, but I might change my mind. Completely different, isn't it? Two words, different ways of saying it. And then if we look at posture, you can take a lot of meaning from somebody's posture. If they've got a very closed, turned away posture, you're not going to really want to approach them and talk to them. If they've got an open, welcoming posture, then somebody's going to be more willing to talk to them. Same with appearance. If somebody looks really untidy, unkempt looking, then again, you're not going to be so keen to talk to them. Smell can come into this as well. Some children have a very sensitive sense of smell, and strong perfumes or strong deodorants can really put them off talking to somebody, or a bad body odor too. Then you've got head movements. Well, we've got nodding, we've got shaking our heads. You know, you've got that kind of, what does that mean? If you're not sure, it's going to be really hard. Same with hand movements. Lots of hand gestures. You know, you've got your waving, you've got your thumbs up, you've got your fist pumps. All of these things can be confusing to kids, or they can learn to do it, but they don't know who to do it with. Where is it appropriate to fist pump? Can you fist pump your head teacher? Can you fist pump granny? And same with eye movements. Winking, closing your eyes, screwing them up. What does that mean? Does it mean you're happy? Does it mean you're sad? Are you flirting with me? You know, bit of a minefield for teenagers if they're not sure on what the eye movements are. Same with facial expressions, you know, frowning, raising an eyebrow. In fact, there's a good book here by Simon Perks. I'll mention it at the end. I'll put up the details. It's called Body Language and Communication. And he talks about the eyebrow flash, which teenagers do quite a lot, where they just kind of raise their eyebrows when they're walking past somebody. So you're acknowledging them, right? But you don't actually have to say anything. It's quite good if you know what it means. And then body contact. Shaking hands with somebody, again with your fist pump, hugging. When's it okay to hug somebody? When's it not okay to hug somebody? When's it better to give a high five? All of that, again, is a minefield. And then closeness. That's the proximity I mentioned earlier. Invading somebody's space, being too close, that makes them feel uncomfortable. But if you're at the other end of the room and you're trying to get their attention, that can be really hard because you're too far away. Where's the right place? So all of these things can be really difficult for children if they are struggling to understand their nonverbal and their vocal means of communication. It can be really hard for them. Okay, I've got an activity I want you to have a go at to try and help illustrate how difficult communication can sometimes be. Can you all grab yourselves a wee piece of paper and a pen? You can pause me while you look for it. Okay, have you all got a bit of paper and a pen? I'm going to give you some instructions. You ready? Draw a line. Draw 2 more lines. Draw a circle. Draw 2 more circles. Draw a curved line. Okay, now I'm guessing that what you have drawn is not necessarily going to be the same as what I have here on my piece of paper. I'm going to show you in a minute. I do believe I'm going to have to give you more instructions. So turn your piece of paper over and follow these instructions. I'm going to have to put my glasses on for this. Draw a horizontal line about 1/3 of the way down your page, like this. Draw 2 more lines so that you make a triangle like this. Draw a circle underneath your triangle so that it's touching it. Inside your circle, draw 2 small circles for eyes, and underneath them, draw a curved circle for a mouth. Now, have you drawn something that is pretty similar to that? I hope so. But what did you draw first time around? Was it anything remotely like a clown's face the first time? I'm guessing not, because I didn't give you enough instructions. It is so important to give really clear instructions. And you may have noticed that I used gesture as well to help you understand what it was that I was wanting you to draw. It is really important to make sure everybody understands and that your child is understanding what you're saying. And if you can back that up with gestures or any kind of visuals, that's going to really, really help them. And it's important to keep each instruction really clear and simple. So let's look at our first P, presentation. What might you see in a child with language or communication difficulties, regardless of diagnosis or not? How might they behave? Well, they might not fully understand an instruction that you have given them because either they haven't been able to follow it, they haven't been able to process it properly. They might amuse themselves doing something else because they don't know what they're supposed to do. And that might be quite frustrating for you. They might not be able to start the task you've given them, again, because they weren't able to listen properly or they weren't able to process exactly what had been said to them. They might ask somebody else in the family to help them, disrupting what they're doing. Ask an older brother or a sister. They're busy doing something else and the sibling your child comes along and asks them to help because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Or they might just sit and do absolutely nothing. They might crawl under the table or become very distressed because, again, they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. They might completely opt out or withdraw, sit and do nothing. Homework can always be a problem, again, because either they've come home and they can't remember what it was that they were supposed to do with the task, or they just don't understand, or they don't want to do homework at home, schoolwork at home. A child with limited language skills might not want to speak out because they're aware that they sound different to other children. So they might gesture or point rather than verbalize something. And that is them trying to communicate. It's just that they haven't got the language skills to put it into words. So let's look at our second P, the profile. Why is your child behaving like they are? Could it be that they have a receptive language difficulty? That is, are they struggling to understand what is being said to them? Are they struggling to understand the language that is being used? And is that because they just aren't able to process it properly? That it's too difficult for them? Is it that they haven't heard the vocabulary before and so they're not understanding? Or could it be that they are having difficulty understanding the non-literal language that is being used? You know, we use so many different turns of phrases and things like metaphors. For example, he was a mountain of a man. We use proverbs. Time and tide wait for no man. What does that mean if you've never heard it before? What are you going to take from that? We use similes. He was as mad as a hatter. Well, again, what does that mean? We use euphemisms as well. You know, if you were trying to explain to your child that their hamster had died and you said, he's passed over to the other side, what's your child actually going to take from that? He's passed over to where? Where's he gone? Sometimes it's better to be really clear. We use hyperbole. The suitcase weighed a ton. And we use lots of idioms. For example, pull your socks up. A child who doesn't understand or takes language literally is going to be completely lost with all these kind of things. So try and be aware of what you're saying to them and explain things. You know, even phrases like take a chair. Well, if a child takes that literally and picks the chair up, they're going to be laughed at, aren't they? And things like look up, everyone. That was said to a child, and he did. He looked up at the ceiling to see what was above him instead of looking at the person that was talking. And another one, eyes on the page. Well, you can imagine. And again, confusing and a bit embarrassing when they realise that they've got it wrong. Giving too long an instruction and putting it in the wrong order can also cause difficulties. For example, saying to your child, so we're going to the shop for bread and milk, but first I want you to tidy your Lego away, put your books on the table, and then go and get your jacket and shoes. Now, what your child has heard first is we're going to the shop. And if that's all that they're able to retain and hold on to, then they're at the door waiting to go. And they're not going to do anything else that you've said. Turn it around, break it down, put it in the order that you want them to do. So, pick up your Lego, put your books on the table, get your shoes, put on your jacket, we're going to the shop. Much clearer and much simpler. Also, if the child's having difficulty understanding non-verbal aspects of communication, such as gesture, facial expressions, tone and volume, if you said to your child, so do I look happy? How are they going to interpret that if they don't understand? That's a really difficult concept, isn't it? You have to be clear. I'm not pleased. I'm unhappy. Let's do this job, but you haven't done it. You know, try and be clear as much as possible. Another example of a child misunderstanding an instruction is illustrated in this story, which happened in a biology lesson in a secondary school. The biology teacher was trying to teach the class about photosynthesis, and she put up on the board this word equation: carbon dioxide plus water with sunlight produces glucose and oxygen. At the end of the lesson, the teacher handed out a piece of paper and said to each of the children, I want you to write the word equation on your bits of paper and take them home and learn them. As they were leaving, she noticed that one boy had written on his piece of paper, equation. And she realised that he had done exactly as she had asked. She had said, write the word equation on your piece of paper. It's confusing, isn't it? The word equation is the whole thing, but he had just picked up on the word equation. Similarly, a child could be totally confused if you were round at a friend's house and the friend said, I've laid out lots of toys for you to play with, help yourself. And the child picks up one of the toys and puts them in his pocket to take home. Easy mistake to make. So again, we have to be very aware of what we're saying and how the child is interpreting it. So let's look at children having difficulties expressing themselves. A child may present with only very limited speech. They may only have 1 or 2 word phrases. They may be able to talk in sentences, but they're not correct. They may get only some sentences correct, or they may mix up their pronouns or their plurals or their tenses. Some children may have difficulty with echolalia. Now, echolalia is when someone repeats back what has been said to them. So you may say to a child, "Do you want a biscuit?" And they will say right back to you, "Do you want a biscuit?" In true echolalia, there will be no meaning attached to what has been said. There's also delayed echolalia, where children repeat and copy phrases that they have heard earlier. For example, one little girl used to say, "Mind your fingers," every time she went near a door, because Granny had said that to her once, and she had remembered it and continued to say it. This is often a feature for children who experience social communication difficulties. However, this is not to be confused with the natural stage in early language development. So it is the quality and pervasiveness of it, of this echolalia, that defines it as a difficulty. Stereotyped use of phrases or idiosyncratic language is also common amongst children with social communication difficulties. A child may answer a question in exactly the same way. So whenever they're asked a question, they will say the same thing, like, let me think, or I wonder. Or the child may answer a question with something totally unrelated to the topic, or give the same answer regardless of the question. So you might ask a child, "What did you have for tea?" And they might answer pizza, whether they had pizza that night or not. It's just a nice, safe, easy answer to give. Or if they give something unrelated, I had an example where I was in a room and a child that I wasn't expecting came in, and I said, "Oh, hello, what are you doing here?" And he paused, and then he said, "Ross is coming for tea." He knew he had to give a response, but he didn't give it a correct answer to my question. Some children might just blurt out the first thing that has been said, the first thing that comes into their heads, and that might get them into trouble, because they might say, "He's fat," or "You smell," or they might swear inappropriately in the wrong context, and that could get them into trouble. Some children may have difficulty using the appropriate volume or rate or pitch, and this could be for a variety of reasons. Some may be unaware that they're speaking too loudly and how that could be affecting other people around them. Some people might be speaking very quietly and not able to raise their voices. Some children may have a motor problem, so they're unable to regulate their level of pitch or the rate that they speak. Some children may have word finding difficulties, so they know what they're trying to say, but they just can't find the word to describe things properly. And some children may have speech sounds, which difficulties which will affect their intelligibility, so they might not be able to say the letter k or g, they might say t or d instead. Some children may have issues with forming sentences, so they'll struggle to get the words out in the right order to form a full grammatically correct sentence, and that could affect their confidence then in speaking, and they could end up becoming quite reluctant speakers because they know that they're not talking and delivering their messages in the right way, or it's different to how others are doing it. Some children struggle to understand what has been asked of them, so they don't respond in the correct way. And this is an illustration here. Mum asked Sophie to go and ask Gran, who was in the lounge, if Gran wanted a cup of tea. Sophie went to the lounge and asked Gran if she wanted a cup of tea. "Do you want a cup of tea, Gran?" And then before waiting for a reply, she went upstairs to her bedroom. Sophie did not pick up on what was being inferred by Mum. Mum wanted to know if Gran wanted a cup of tea so that she could make her one. And she had hoped that Sophie would come back and tell her, yes, Gran wants a cup of tea, Mum, and then Mum would have been able to make it. This is what's called theory of mind. Sophie was unable to pick up on that inference and understand fully what was being expected of her. And this can be a problem that can affect children with autism, but it can also affect children with ADHD, with fetal alcohol syndrome, or children with a brain injury or brain damage. So let's now think about our third P, our plan. How can you support your child? Well, the Words Up key messages are a great place to start. And my colleague Sharon Smith has filmed the Words Up key messages, and they're available here on the Pines website for you to have a look at. She's filmed all the different messages individually. The face-to-face, play and talk, copy and add, pause and wait, and be careful with questions. So it's well worth having a look at these films. It's also important to remember to say your child's name first before you give them a message or an instruction. Just calling out, right, listen up, or okay folks, if there's more than one person in the room. The child that has neurodevelopmental difficulties might not pick up on the fact that you are including them in the message. So try and remember to say their name first. That's really useful. And if you put an instruction as a question, for example, would you like to tidy your room right now for me? Be prepared for them to answer no. Turn it around. We're very good at doing that because we're polite, aren't we? Would you like to make me a cup of tea? Not really. Give the instruction as an instruction, and then that's clear, and it helps the child or the young person know what exactly it is that you're wanting them to do. And also tell the child what to do, not what not to do. Don't shout and say, don't run or don't climb. If they're not fully picking up, they're going to hear the one word run and they're off. Turn it around and say walk, and it's clear and it's simple for them. So how else can we support? We'll use visuals wherever possible. And visuals can be anything. Visuals can be objects. You could hold up 2 different options of drinks, milk or water, to help the child choose what they want. Or if it's something to play with, a car or some Lego, showing them the objects so that they can help understand, that the objects help understand what you're saying to them. Visuals could be photographs. So taking a photo of Gran's house, taking a photo of the nursery or the school or the shop that you're going to, or your car, so that you're backing up again what you're saying, and it helps them visually understand what they've to do. Visuals can also be in the form of symbols, first then boards, timelines, sequences. In fact, we've got a lot of examples of that again on the Pines website that you can have a look at and download if you want to use them. Visuals can also be on your phone, or if your child can read, then making lists for them or encouraging them to have a written list of the jobs that need to be done, or writing down the order of events in the day. Using calendars, your phone's a great thing to help guide them around, taking notes, using their calendar, using maps as well. So lots of ways in which you can use visuals to help with the spoken word, because once a spoken word is spoken, it's gone, and they've got to rely on their memory to recall what's been said. If you can back it up with any kind of visual at all, that's going to help. Reduce your language. Say less and stress is a really good reminder to help you break down what you're saying, to keep it as clear and simple as possible. And also think of the language you're using. As I said, be aware of idioms and metaphors and sarcasm. Is your child understanding what you're saying? And be aware of non-verbal use of language. Is your child understanding your body language? Are they understanding your facial expression or the expression of those around them? And give your child processing time. So pause and wait. When you've said something, give them time to think about it and then form an answer. And if you've got to repeat what you've said, try and repeat it in the same way. Because if you change the way you've said it, you're just loading them with more language that they have to process and break down. Think of background noises and the volume level in your house. Do you live in a noisy house? Do you have the radio on? Do you have the washing machine going? Do you have the TV in another room? How much background noise does your child have to filter out before they can focus in on your voice? What can you do to reduce the level of noise around about? And also think of where your child is sitting in relation to you. Don't talk to the back of your head. Don't talk to the back of their head. Sometimes sitting side by side with a child that has language and communication difficulties can be really good, because it takes away them having to focus on your face and understand your facial expression. Some say the best conversations they've ever had with their children is when they're in the car driving, because you're close in proximity, but it takes away that kind of difficulty of understanding facial expression and responding. So maybe sit beside them. That's a good way of supporting. So let's recap. Was there anything that I said in this presentation on language and communication that was a light bulb moment for you? Was there anything that I said that made you think, that's how my child presents? You could maybe write in the wheel grid and think about the presentation of your child, jot that down, and then think about the profile. Why might this be happening? Could you jot down under communication the things that you think might be the reasons why your child is struggling in certain ways? And then make a plan. What can you put in place that is going to support your child? Have a think about it, either jot it down on a piece of paper or, as I say, use the wheel grid that Rachel mentioned at the start to help you make a plan for how you can support your child. Thanks for listening.